After months of speculation, discussing all of the hypothetical scenarios, and overanalyzing every major mock draft, just like that, the 2021 NFL Draft is in the books. Throughout the 3-day player selection meeting, General Manager George Paton and the Broncos football staff added 10 total players, including the best cornerback in the draft, Pat Surtain II. Here to help me break down Denver's 2021 draft class, a star-studded trio featuring James Palmer from the NFL Network, as well as the Ohio State University. I feel like we should point that out.
Well, that's going to play a role here.
Oh yeah, we know. 104.3 The Fan's draft expert and Senior Bowl enthusiast, Cecil, Lammey, and the man who tells the experts what they need to know on draft night, the NFL's lead draft researcher and analyst, Chad Reuter. Guys, we'll delve into the day 2 and 3 picks later in the show, but first, let's start with night 1. The Denver Broncos stayed put using their number 9 overall selection on Alabama's star corner, Pat Surtain II, the highest graded cornerback in this year's class. James, as someone who said it over and over again on this show that the Broncos would take Justin Fields, what was your initial reaction when you heard Goodell say Surtain to the Broncos?
Alexis, sitting in that stadium down in Jacksonville, I think somebody actually took a video of me where I was just going, no, take Justin Fields. What are you doing? Now, they contemplated Justin Fields. They talked about it. He was their other option at number 9. Now, it's kind of funny how this has gone full circle. If we remember the very first mock drafts that came out sometime, 9 years ago, it feels like, it was cornerback to the Denver Broncos. And it's so funny, they go with cornerback. And there's nothing against Patrick Surtain, but the worst thing that could happen to the Denver Broncos, and I thought this was a good draft class, is for Justin Fields to go out there in Chicago and just ball out. Once again, the Broncos don't use this avenue, taking a quarterback at the top of the draft to try to turn their franchise around. This is the second general manager to avoid it. Let's see what happens with Justin Fields, because that is going to be where Broncos fans' eyes are over the next several years, Cecil, is how is Justin Fields doing? Because we had a chance to go and get him. I don't think the feeling is the same for Mac Jones. I think it's much more about Justin Fields. Now, there's the Aaron Rodgers, loop-de-loop that was thrown in right before the start of the draft. To my understanding, that deal was no closer to getting done than the Broncos acquiring Russell Wilson or Deshaun Watson. You can have everything in place, and George Paton was maneuvering and talking about trading back and getting extra picks to be part of a package that he would send to Green Bay. The problem, Cecil, you need the Packers to pick up the phone, and Gutty wasn't doing that at all. He doesn't want to let Aaron Rodgers go. Rodgers was obviously trying to maximize his ability to potentially be traded by having this all come out on draft day when so many deals are done. There's picks to be exchanged, but for a deal to happen, you need there to be somewhat of a dialogue between the two teams. That didn't even happen. So until a quarterback comes into play, sadly, Patrick Surtain will take a backseat, and we'll continue to analyze what happens with the Broncos at the quarterback spot moving forward.
Well, be careful, James, because now radio guys are going to say, sources say they're in on Russell Wilson and Deshaun Watson and Aaron Rodgers. Like the quarterback conversation is always going to be in this, and you don't want Justin Fields to turn into a Josh Allen type of prospect. Yep. And that's something that I know Broncos fans are certainly worried about. And if Justin Fields goes out there and he balls out, then you'll think, okay, that's the first Bears quarterback since Sid Luckman. And that's well before any of ours time, and even mine, and I'm the oldest one on this show. So when we look at the situation now, we go, all right, you go forward, you try to find your quarterback in another way. And what way is that? When is that? Who knows? But we know that the Broncos didn't love Justin Fields. And if you don't love a guy, don't take him in the top 10. And they haven't loved anybody because, 3 out of the last 4 drafts, they've had a top 10 pick and haven't taken a quarterback.
Well, guys, no matter how you feel about the Broncos quarterback situation, you cannot let that distract you from what the Broncos got in Pat Surtain. What are some of the physical traits that make Pat Surtain such a great get, Chad?
Well, I thought he was the best corner in the draft because you line that guy up against any receiver outside and he's going to neutralize and press. Even if you're not pressing him, he will physically handle that guy. And when that ball is anywhere in his sphere, he's going to find it and he's going to knock it away or make the interception either way. So you found a guy that's going to really be a solid cover corner for many years. Obviously the genetics, Patrick Surtain Sr. was a fantastic player for the Dolphins for many years. And I think you got the top guy, and some people thought the top defensive player in the draft. So I don't think I totally agree about Fields probably being the better selection, but you can't turn down your nose on the guy that they select.
And guys, I was at Patrick Surtain's pro day, and I remember the Broncos not being there because they were finalizing the deal with Kyle Fuller, right? They were planning on going, ended up not going. I ended up calling some people in the building going, how did your evaluation of JC Horn go? That was the pro day that was the next day of the South Carolina corner. And they, they raved about how competitive he was, what they liked. And I was like, well, you guys missed Pat's pro day. And they were like, we didn't really need to go. I mean, this guy is one of the cleanest prospects we've ever seen. He checks every single box on and off the field. And one little story that I heard when I was in Alabama talking to people in that program was his football IQ, Cecil, is so good that there were times Nick Saban would kind of joke with him early in the week, I was told, where it was like, Pat, what, I know you're watching film. What would you do against Auburn this week? What do you think our game plan should be? And Saban was like, 9 times out of 10, what Surtain told me was what I was already planning to be our scheme on defense. That's kind of how his approach is at the cornerback spot. He is a polished player that before this past year could have been a pick right about where he was. Maybe one team joked to me saying he would have been the Cowboys' best corner a year ago.
Yeah, and you look at the situation with PS2, and I talked to his dad probably about a month ago, and he said his son knows his why. And I think that in football and life, if you can go forward and have that confidence to know your why am I here? Why am I doing this? Where am I going? Pat Surtain Jr. has had this idea, this mindset of making it to the NFL, but not just to get there. We've seen it in the past where guys are excited they get drafted, or they're excited they're a first round pick. He's not satisfied. He knows his why. His why is to be a fantastic pro, and he's got all the tools, great off the field, incredibly smart and aggressive. Something as we go through this show and we talk about all these picks, you're going to see a theme from George Paton, and I think he's found the identity for the Denver Broncos.
So, sorry to be a windy guy, but I had another story from Alabama that jumped out at me. He didn't win the Jim Thorpe Award, even though pretty much everybody in the country was going, this guy should win the Jim Thorpe as the country's best defensive back. It's really because if you go and watch, nobody threw the ball at him. It's hard to make plays if nobody targets you at all. When he went into Nick Saban's office and Saban was going to tell him, hey, man, you didn't win the Jim Thorpe. We thought you were going to win it. And he goes, okay. And Saban goes, are you upset? He's like, nah, one time's practice. We good? Like, I don't care. He doesn't care about stuff like that. And it goes along with what Cecil had to say about his why. He thinks of much grander things than something like that.
Chad, what would a successful rookie season look like for PS2?
Well, I think obviously he's got to get on the field right away. And you can do that even with Ronald Darby, or Terrence Trent Darby, as I like to call him, and Kyle Fuller on the team, because either of those two guys can play inside. That's not Surtain's deal, is playing in the slot, but either one of those other guys have the agility to handle that slot responsibility. You need 3 corners. You need 3 really good corners in this league. So he'll play outside. He's going to neutralize one of the receivers. The other 2 guys will fill in there, and they'll be set. I think his ability to stay healthy, not hit the rookie wall in week 13, 14, whenever that is, he'll be out there. He's going to play. And I think I have no doubt he's going to be a really solid player. Yes, he is going to give up completions. That happens, rookies in the league. But he's going to be a fantastic player. And I think as long as he's on the field the whole year, it's a good season for him.
All right, guys. Well, coming up after the break, a deep dive into Denver's day 2 picks. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Broncos Beat. Alexis Perry here, joined by NFL draft experts Chad Reuter, Cecil Lammey, and James Palmer. Guys, day 2 started with a bang as general manager George Paton made the move up from number 40 to number 35 to pick up the man who finished with the highest PFF grade among running backs, highest rushing grade, and the most missed tackles forced in college football last season, running back Javonte Williams. Cease, we knew the Broncos would take a running back somewhere in this draft, but were you surprised to see them move up to get one?
No, because Javonte Williams, my number 1 back in this class, should have been a first-round pick. And in talking to people around the league and checking in with my guys around the Dolphins, they had a big 3 at running back, and that 3 included Javonte Williams. The Broncos had to get in front of Miami. They did. I applaud this move. You have a player that has aggression. Again, there is a message and a tone from George Paton and what the identity for this Broncos team is going to be. And that includes aggressive players like Williams with those 75 broken tackles to lead the FBS, with 72 of his carries going for first downs, with that great ability in pass protection and as a receiver out of the backfield as well. Plus, you know, people try to look at knocks on him. Well, he worked in a committee with Michael Carter. Yeah, that's fine. Najee Harris had over 800 touches at Alabama. When you look at Javonte Williams, he had just a little over 400. So he's fresh. There's a lot of tread left on those tires, and those tires should get a lot of work for the Denver Broncos, because I think he's the type of player that can come in and not just work in a committee, but lead the way for this team. Yes, that means push Melvin Gordon for that starting job.
NFL works in committees. Like, that's the way the NFL works. You need multiple backs to get through a season. You cannot rely on one running back in the NFL anymore. You need multiple guys that go out there and do things. I want to toot my own horn because I remember on this show, Alexis asked me, James, what would be a successful draft for the Denver Broncos? I said, whether you get a quarterback in the first round or not, if you can get a running back in the second round, I believe that's what I said, that would be a successful draft for the Denver Broncos, no matter who's at running back, who's at quarterback, because you're going to have the ability to have this guy come out and help out Drew Lock if he wins the battle, to help out Teddy Bridgewater if he ends up being your starter, to help out, which he doesn't really need it, Aaron Rodgers if he's going to be your quarterback. I think this was a really great pick, mainly because I was hearing the same things as Cecil. There were other teams in that division kind of letting the Broncos know, to my understanding, like, hey, the Dolphins are going to take him. And so they go up, and I think moving up, Chad, for a running back, sometimes people go, oh, like, not sure you want to do that. But I think this situation and what they did, this might end up being, because we know who Patrick Surtain's going to be, this might be the one pick that we keep looking at in this draft going, man, what a smart move by George Paton.
Yeah, and quickly, Alexis, on this, they didn't have to give up a draft pick to get him. They just moved down from the 4th to the 6th. That's not that big of a deal for that kind of trade. Not at all, especially when you get a guy that's very high on your board. And also, as James said, there's always a committee. There's also injuries and free agency. A couple of guys in the Broncos, I think, are scheduled for free agency next year. So a lot of teams pick guys with exactly Gordon and Freeman, I think. So a lot of teams pick 2022 guys in the 2021 draft. Now, obviously, Williams is going to contribute this year, but they have an eye to the future. So that's why it was a good trade and a good pick.
Okay, well, now adding to the moves made on day 2, George Paton turned pick number 71 into numbers 98, 105, and 164. But it's 98 that might be my actual favorite pick in the draft. Quinn Miners, the man who didn't even have a 24/7 sports profile coming out of high school, played D3 at Wisconsin Whitewater, an absolute beast of an interior offensive lineman who really captured everyone's attention at the 2021 Senior Bowl. So, Cecil, as Mr. Senior Bowl himself,
Mr. Senior Bowl himself,
other than the gut, what do you remember about his showing in Mobile?
Yeah, toughness, playing through with a broken hand, coming in and playing center when he didn't play center in college. He was a left guard. He taught himself center by snapping to a garbage can. And Chad's been at the Senior Bowl as much as I have over the last 15 plus years. And when you look at the situation, it reminds me of Ali Marpet. You rarely see a Division III player that gets that invite to the Senior Bowl. And in fact, you can count those players on one hand of a bad woodshop teacher. So to just get that invite and then to show up and prove that he not only belongs with the best seniors in the nation, but can dominate first and second rounders out there on the practice field, it's great upside from this young man.
I think specifically also, Cecil, getting him at 98 when the Broncos were considering him at 71 and considering him at 76. I think if you go and get a guy, whether maybe your scouts are out of their minds, but at the same time, the positive outlook of it would be you were still able to trade back and get 2 guys that you were considering, and we'll get to Browning in a second because the Ohio State Buckeyes are the greatest team in the history of the universe, that you guys were considering in the 70s, and you get that late. I also love that you brought up Ali Marpet, because you go and look at the small school guys that made up half that offensive line for the Super Bowl winning Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and the toughness and the grit, and sometimes, Chad, the path that a player has, specifically on an offensive line, can prove to be very, very, very important, specifically with a guy like this working with Mike Munchak.
Yeah, I mean, he was an hour and a half away from me at Wisconsin Whitewater. So I was aware of him. Yeah, no. But in his film, it takes you about 5 seconds to understand that this guy's going to be an NFL player. Okay, so I think, and like you said, James, I had him as a late second, early third round pick, and I think he deserved to go there. So the fact that they were able to get him as late as they did, that was a great pick. He's going to be there for the long haul. Again, not necessarily a 2021 pick for this team necessarily. Injuries happen, but again, 2022 and forward, he's going to be a starter for this team. And to get that at the end of the third round is a great deal.
All right, guys, day 2 was capped off by a stellar snag and the first pick from JP's alma mater, the Ohio State University linebacker, Baron Browning. Now, Browning played both inside and outside linebacker for the Buckeyes, but I think we could all agree that we'd love to see him inside here with the Denver Broncos. So given the inside linebacker position was an area of concern that we talked about last week heading into the draft, does Browning really ease those concerns for you guys?
Yeah, I think it does. Baron Browning, as one scout that I text with told me, the next best thing to Micah Parsons is Baron Browning. And you have that athleticism. For the love of God, don't cross him up and make him an OLB. Put him at ILB. Let him learn at ILB. Ohio State, if they did mess it up a little bit with Browning, James, sorry to offend you, but it's that they moved him around. Like, I'd like to see him stay at inside linebacker. You see the sizzle reel from the Broncos is like he's, defended Pat Freiermuth, baby Gronk in the red zone. This guy can cure your woes that you've had at that position. Baron Browning, speaking of late second, early third, it's exactly where he should have gone. Great pick for the Broncos.
Cecil, did you fall out of your chair when Vic Fangio was like, we're going to cross-train him a little bit? We're going to see. Were you like, no, like Justin Hollins, like, don't do that. Or DeMarcus Walker, don't do that. So please let Browning play ILB. I'd love to see him operate in there. Obviously, that we know after the Super Bowl how important that position is to fill against specifically a team in your division that got mollywopped by a team that was unbelievably talented on the defensive side of the ball. But I'll bring back to them trading back and getting Browning where they did. Imagine the excitement, Chad, in Denver right now if he would have been picked at 71. Right. Like, I think the steam for Browning would have been building even further, going, oh my, this guy's going to help change our defense. It's that piece in the middle that we've been missing, that speed, that athleticism from that middle linebacker spot. And then you go and get him in the spot you got him. I think we have to make sure people know the talent that he has. It's not where he was picked.
Right. And I think that's the weird thing about a team like the Saints wanting to trade 2 third-rounders for 1 third round. And Paulson Adebo could be a really good player. But the Broncos got 2 starters, if not this year, then in future years. And I think you can't pass that up. And Browning, I agree with you guys. He's a top 75 pick all day. But guys like this sometimes fall. Fred Warner, 3rd-round pick. He's an all-pro. So Browning has Pro Bowl ability. And I don't mind them looking at him outside because, again, free agency in 2022, you have to see what he can do in those spots. You don't want to spread a rookie too thin. I think you let him do, and inside linebackers just don't stay inside the box, by the way. They go outside. They do things in coverage and playing the run outside. So he can make plays either going sideline to sideline, even if he's lined up in the box to start.
All right, guys, still to come on Broncos Beat. These guys will share their favorite day 3 picks and grade George Paton's first draft in Denver. You won't want to miss it. Welcome back to Broncos Beat, guys. The Denver Broncos had 6 picks on day 3, 5 of which they used on defensive players, as if this didn't already look like the league's best defense on paper. They also picked up Auburn wideout Seth Williams in the 6th round. So overall, as we take a look at Denver's day 3 draftees, is there one in particular that really excites you, Chad?
Well, Marquise Spencer was a really good defensive lineman in Mississippi State. And honestly, I thought the Broncos may look at him in the 5th round if they didn't get a guy like Taquan Graham from Texas. So I thought they got great value for him in the 7th round. At 300 pounds, he moves and he acts like a 240-pounder sometimes. And I think teams are a little afraid he's a little too, he didn't play to his size. But I think they'll coach that out of him. He's going to be a great 5 tech for them. And I think that was an excellent pick late in the draft.
I'll jump in with Jamar Johnson out of Indiana, the free safety. He was the 2nd of 2 safeties that they took. Tackling, we'll see how Vic Fangio likes that. But at the same time, his ability to cover Cecil, and they play, 5 or more defensive backs about 75, 85% of the time, according to Vic Fangio. So if you look at what you're doing in the secondary, we love the safeties that are in play right now. But the more bodies that you have back there, with how much the ball is thrown in this division, he might be a guy that could surprise a little bit early, getting a couple of snaps.
Well, I'll do my best James Palmer impression and say Ohio State's the greatest college football program ever, because I had 4 defenders that I love from the Buckeyes, and they got 2 of them, Jonathan Cooper. And this is a great pick for this team because you get a guy that has great knowledge of the game, high football intelligence, great character as a captain for the Buckeyes, and also a player that's still developing as a rusher. Like, his rushes are fairly basic, honestly, but his motor never quits. And if he learns how to stack moves, rip, swim, spin, all these sorts of things, saw him down at the Senior Bowl. This guy has tremendous upside, and you get him that late in the draft. It's a great pick for Denver.
Hey, was there any position that wasn't addressed in this year's draft that you felt needed to be?
Yeah, the quarterback spot.
Quarterback.
I knew you were going to say that, James.
Well, I mean, I just think everyone here has been waiting to see how that quarterback spot is going to be filled since the retirement of Peyton Manning. They've tried every avenue except taking somebody at the top of the draft, like I said. I just think we were all waiting to see what would happen because we keep thinking about different ways they could improve the spot. When, okay, if they don't go in the first round, maybe they'll take somebody, one of these guys that are, maybe second, third, fourth round picks. They didn't do that either. But at the same time, I think all of us are just looking at that spot. But when I get to my grade, I'll tell you furthermore what I think about the quarterback spot.
Yeah, it's quarterback. And, why couldn't you throw a late round pick at Jamie Newman, something like that? But this team really likes Brett Rippon. Hey, I really like Brett Rippon as a future offensive coordinator. So, like, for me, yeah, you could have thrown a bone out there with the late round QB, and tried to develop somebody.
Well, Alexis, I think this is a solid overall roster, and they carpet bombed the secondary, so they got that taken care of, and they picked guys at all the other spots. So I don't know that there was like a major weakness other than quarterback that that they needed to address any more than they did.
Okay, well, if I remember correctly, A was the average grade that you guys gave George Paton after his first free agency here in Denver. So I obviously have to know, what grade would you give him after his first draft? James, go ahead.
I'm going to go B-, but this has a potential to increase. I think he did a really good job filling these. I think Patrick Surtain was a really great pick when you just look at the pick, right? And you don't look that Justin Fields was sitting there. I think it is a fantastic pick. I think they really did a good job getting value in the middle of the draft as well. I will give this an A+ if he finds a way to get Aaron Rodgers before the start of the 2021 season. We have preached, Cecil, the patience that George Paton had through free agency and the patience that we've seen him have throughout his time with the Denver Broncos. If he's using that once again, thinking that, this is something that I'm going to wait and see. I have a gut feeling that this is something that could become potentially an avenue for us. This draft class is phenomenal if you end up doing that, because honestly, the number of teams Aaron Rodgers could go to if he works his way out of Green Bay and doesn't host Jeopardy is very small. There's only a couple of teams that could handle the cap and that he's interested in going to. Now, he doesn't have a no trade clause, so they could send him wherever they wanted, but the list of teams isn't that wide. If he gets Aaron Rodgers, this draft class is an A+.
This draft right now is a B+ with potential, of course, to be greater with a quarterback change or upgrade with Aaron Rodgers. But it's a B+ because you strengthened strength, you filled holes that were on your team, and you also got starters for the future. As Chad's pointed out this entire show, like, you just don't think about 2021. You think about beyond that. Yeah. And they have some great players, 4 or 5 starters from these picks for George Paton. It's a B+ for me.
Yeah, I also gave it a B+. It'll be very interesting to see how Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater handle things this year. Does Drew Lock take that next step? Can Teddy Bridgewater show that he wasn't the reason that the Panthers couldn't win ball games?
Oh God!
If he can do, if he can do that, and then these other guys be what we think they can be, then this could be a really good draft class and start some good things for the Broncos.
All right, guys, that's all the time we have for this week's edition of Broncos Beat. We will continue this discussion, and I'm sure the Aaron Rodgers speculation next Monday right here on Broncos Beat. Have a great week, Broncos country.